So who am I? I'm Mirjam Hilgeman. I've been with the Duyfken not for 20 years, like Richard said, it's only been 14. So what is Duyfken? Duyfken is a 16th century challenge. She's a replica ship. She was built in WA, Fremantle. And she's a replica ship of a ship that came to Australia in 1606 and charted the first part of Australia. They had a bit of a challenge on their hand because they thought it would be a fantastic idea to try to make it exactly the same as the original one. So she's a plank first replica. A crew that came to Cape York Peninsula was Captain Willem Janszoon, so not Mr. Cook. Anybody who thought that Cook was one of the first, he was one of the last to actually chart a part of Australia. So 1606 was one of the first European vessels that came to Australian coast, and they charted about 300 kilometers. Now, to put it in perspective, they were a Dutch vessel. The coastline of the Netherlands is 300 kilometers. So they pretty much charted the whole coastline of the Netherlands. It's only like a little peanut here in Australia. They made a map. Due to this map, Duyfken was chosen to be recreated. It was built in Fremantle by a fantastic group of people. I was not involved in that. I will not claim to be an expert on it. But I've been long enough with the vessel that I've gathered information over the last few years, and I'll try to share that as best as I can with you guys. They did a fantastic job, and as a result, Duyfken sails really well. So it's a replica ship, but not just a museum ship, it actually sails. So what I'm going to talk about is a few things. We'll start out with the building, design, and sailing. And then later on there's options for questions, and I'll do my very best to answer it. If I don't know it, I'll make something up. So how come that we know the shape of Duyfken? By this. This is a very little snippet of a much larger painting that was made of the Battle of Banda. And to give you a little bit of back history, Spice trade. More valuable than gold, everybody wanted to have it in the 16th century. Portuguese had it first, and the Dutch took that over by force. Now, some chap made a beautiful painting of it, and there was Duyfken. Very little in the corner. So with that, we knew a little bit about the shape of the vessel. Also, we had shipwrecks that was found. You might have known of the Batavia that was found in WA, the Vasa in Stockholm. From that, they gathered information of how these ships were constructed, and they made a line plan from it. So with that, we got this one. So they actually had, for making the replica, a blueprint. Because the original ships, back then, shipwrights just knew what they were doing. They were not literate, they just knew what they were doing and passing on knowledge. So you can't go back to the 16th century, pick up a book and a blueprint of Duyfken is this. It wasn't the case. So they had to draw it all by hand for this one. Sail plan. So this was the idea of how she was going to look when they were finished. When you compared the drawing to the actual ship, it's pretty close. Pretty close. Here and there's a few differences. One side is a little bit shorter than the other side because, well, it was still built by hand. And that's the end result. Now, how did we get to here? They decided to do everything as traditional as they could. So that meant you get a tree, all found in Latvia, hand-picked for their shapes, then carved out. Best bits go in different places. So on the ship you will find knees, the keel, all those sort of things were all picked out so that the best shaped tree would go to the best spot in the vessel. So it was a big jigsaw puzzle, big mess first, and the end result is a beautiful ship. So this is making the keel here at the bottom. Apparently I got a pointer on this thing. Let's see if I can make it work. There we go. Press the button. So that's the keel being shaped. And then slowly over time, all the pieces come together. So this is the back of the vessel. So here you get the structure of the ship. Press the button. There we go. So, oh, different. My first presentation playing with buttons. I'm very sorry. So she's a plank first construction. Now modern day ships, You build the shape of the ship and then you put the planks on it. This is the other way around. What you do by this way of constructing, you're constructing a very strong, sturdy beast of a ship, because what you do is you bend all the planks in shape and then you put the supports in. By doing so, there's no tension on the planks. They don't want to come away from the ship. You can actually beach Duyfken, depending on the ground, and she'll be fine. All right, let's see if we can make this work. So how do you bend planks? Well, this is oak. You can't just bend it by hand. What you do is you actually soak it in water so it becomes wet. Then you make a framework to get the shape you want to have. Then you have open fire, which sounds really dangerous, and it took a bit of trial and error to get that to the right stage of actually bending the plank and not set fire to it. Yes, you can find planks on board the ship that are scarred by fire, but we managed to get them into the right shape, so they still are on board. So by pressuring them, so where's the little thing? You get the round curve that was actually needed for the ship. And then slowly, plank by plank, the ship becomes taking shape. So as you can see, temporary fastenings keep them in spot, and then later on the supporting beams get put in. So the actual hull and structure of the ship, when it's all finished, became about that thick. So you can imagine that you can beach the ship and she will not go anywhere. Just let that sink in for a moment, the amount of work that went into that. So every single piece of timber is shaped for the ship. Then to hold it all together, you need dowels. A dowel is a wooden stick that gets pre-holed, drilled in, put in place, and you can see all these little stripes and little wedges that get beaten in afterwards, and then it gets cut flush. Those dowels are actually keeping the ship together. They're fantastic. But to comply with modern day rules, as we are living in the 21st century and not the 16th century, they said, oh, dowels? No, you can't just have a ship with dowels. They need to have modern day fasteners. Sadly, these modern day fasteners are slowly killing the ship because they rot away. So we have the most problem with our maintenance is with the 21st century and not the 16th century, because these dowels are made out of oak and they just move with the ship. So slowly, over time, we made it to deck level. Now luckily these builders did us a favor and they decided to have only one big hold space, because there was a big debate when they were starting to design a ship if she would have two deck levels. For a cargo side of perspective, having two levels makes sense, because you have your cargo in one space and your food and drink supplies to keep the sailors alive on another space. I'm very pleased that they've chosen to have one big open space, because now we actually sleep there instead of having to come all through the ship all the time. So what you're looking at here is the deck level, and oops, wrong button, sorry guys. Up here is the main deck roof, and this is the main deck level. So we actually can stand in our main deck, so when it's pouring down with rain, which it did a lot, we're sailing from Sydney to here, we actually have some places to stay dry. And there she is, finished product. Beautiful ship on a truck driving through Fremantle, because the ship was built next to the Maritime Museum and you can't launch a boat from there because it was a piece of grassland. So she had her maiden voyage going loop-de-loops around the whole city, trying to navigate roundabouts and all sorts of things to get to the boat lifters where they actually dropped it neatly into the water. Next step is to put rigging on it, because without rigging, without mast, without sails, you can't sail her. So there was a lot of work, time and effort put into uprig the ship. And to give you an idea of how much lines we use, it's about 4 kilometers of actually standing and running rigging. Now what's standing and running rigging? Standing rigging is all the lines that keep the mast in place. Running rigging is all the lines that help sail the ship. So they're at sheets, text, braces. If you know a little bit about sailing, you know what I'm on about, but I'll show you later on in pictures. So to get it all up there was a bit tricky, because when you have nothing erected, luckily we have some chaps with cranes that was mighty helpful to help to get masts up. So this chap here is doing some monkey business. Nowadays we wouldn't allow that. You need to have your safety gear, harnesses, safety lines, God knows what else, all on you. But back then you just climb up. So slowly the ship is becoming a ship. So as you can see here, main mast, foremast, bowsprit, mizzenmast. So she actually has 4 masts, but we call her a 3-master. All the ropes. So this is your standing rigging, your sails, and this little stuff here is called marlin. That's not counted into the 4 kilometers. It's about 4 times that. This little stuff here is the actual bit that keeps the whole rigging together. We go through miles and miles of that stuff. Then once you got your standing rigging up, you get the wonderful task of rattling down. Red lines are the little lines that you stand on to actually climb the mast, which is a fun job. Getting up there to do the first one is a bit tricky, but after that, slowly it becomes like a big climbing wall. It becomes easier. And then you get this as the end result. So this was on the day that she was launched and her very first trial sail. So as you can see, we've got a spritsail, 4-course, 4-top, main course, and a mizzen lateen. And she sails wonderful. These people in Fremantle have done an excellent job, because when she's in her elements and she's sailing, she's fantastic. Under engines, not so much. So that's when we get to the fun part, and the part that I've been doing since 2009 is the sailing side of things. So how do we do that? Well, we navigate. We are steering with a whipstaff. What's a whipstaff? Whipstaff is basically a tiller extension. So we don't have a steering wheel, because the steering wheel was not invented yet. So we steer with a whipstaff, which is great fun, but sometimes a little bit tricky. You can't go anywhere without a crew. Crew is the most important bit of a ship. Your ship is static, but without a crew, she will not go anywhere. And then, of course, the sleeping arrangements, which is the most glorious bit of our ship. Not really. So here we are, sailing along. When we're sailing on the ocean, we do it as a team. But not everybody can be awake at the same time. So we use a Swedish watch system. So half the team will be sleeping, half the team will be looking after the ship, and we're taking turns. Now, how does that work? Well, we have a crew of 16. We have our day workers. The day workers are your captain, your engineer, your cook, and the bosun. The bosun is the person that tries to fix all the things that were broken in the night and say in the morning, "Good morning, please fix this for us. We go to bed now." So he is a full-time job of retying things, swapping things out all the time. Why does that happen? Well, we're working with the ship. When you're out at the sea, waves make the ship move, things chafe, things break. It's the normal side of things. When you don't use it, it will fatigue and decay as well. But when you're sailing with it, the pressures of the sails, the chafing, it just wears and tears. It's the good wear and tear, because we're actually using the ship. Navigating. Now that's the tricky bit, because you want to go from here to there, and there is no Google Maps that you can just say to Siri, "Hey, let's go to Hobart. Which blue line do we need to follow?" What you get is your sea charts. I found this one really amusing for you guys, Duyfken Point. It's actually a point here in Australia that we sailed past in 2012. Now, if you have a crew on board that has a slight interest of what we're doing, you get these sort of pictures of everybody gathering around. If you look closely, that's me, of what is the plan. If you have masters on board that are willing to share knowledge, that's fantastic, because then you pick up things along the line of how to navigate. Sometimes you get mates on board that actually will allow you to figure out where on Earth you are and make a little mark on the chart. So every time you're on a chart, you keep track of where you are. So this is Malcolm, so people might recognize him. He is also here at the Wooden Boat Show. He's master of Lady Nelson. And he came sailing with us, and he's a great chap. So this is in our main cabin. This track here is trying to keep the chart on board the vessel. Nowadays we've got a beautiful chart hut. You can see it on board if you want to come. We've tried all sorts of things over the years of trying to keep the charts dry, which is a big challenge, and try to keep them on the ship, which is quite helpful as well. Nowadays we have a more modern chart hidden in a box that it's really easy and you can just see it. So, help! They said I could call for help if I needed. So here's Malcolm, and he's putting down the little mark of where we are. And we do that every half an hour. Every half an hour we mark where we are, so we keep track of where we're going, so that we don't get lost along the way. Now occasionally what happens is we sail off the chart, which for me personally is not a problem, because I don't look at charts every half an hour. All I look at is blue sea. So for me, when we sail off the chart, for me we just continue on where we're going. But sometimes you get a mate and he's complete panic because he doesn't have a piece of paper to put a mark down. And I'm like, mate, we're fine. We're all right. There's water under the keel. There's blue skies above us. We got wind in the sails. We've got a compass. This is what they had in the 16th century. They didn't have a map where you can put on every half an hour a little mark of where you are. You just keep track of which direction you're going. And we know where we want to go. We'll be all right. Some people disagree with that. And then the moment you come back onto the chart, there's a big sigh of relief. We're back on lone lands. It's okay, mate. We're all right. Now, steering the ship. We steer with the whipstaff. As you can see, there is me. I thought I would put myself in there so you know that I actually do some work, not just chat around. Is a big stick. Better to see here with Peter. So it's a big stick that goes through the deck. It comes through the deck here. And this is our tiller that's connected to the rudder on the back of the ship. Steering with the tiller and with the whipstaff can be a real challenge, because as you can see, there's nothing in there that can absorb the forces. When you have a steering wheel, it's connected to ropes, pulleys, and all sorts of things. And you can hang on to your steering wheel and keep on course quite easily. If a wave hits that rudder button, you up here will know about it. When they found sailors' graves, it's a bit of a morbid story. In the Netherlands, lots of graves there. Netherlands expands, lots of people living in a very tiny little country. They needed space, so they had to vacate graves. And a lot of sailor graves, they had all the same markings on their ribs. And they couldn't figure out why until they started sailing with these sort of ships. These whipstaffs can break ribs. When waves hit that rudder, that force will come through. Often you wedge yourself in, as you can see here. I put my whole weight on that to keep it on 10 degrees to starboard. If that wave hits, you get lifted up. If it comes in smacking, because it will go like this, you can break your ribs. And we found that out by doing experimental rebuilding of these ships, that these sailors really had a hard time back then. Nowadays, and you can see me wearing here a harness, I can actually strap in. Because as you can see there, there's a big hatch, a gap in the deck. If you lose your footing, down you go. So yes, we are being careful. But it's hard work. It's not for the faint-hearted. Then we want to eat and sleep and do all the wonderful things. So this here is our state-of-the-art galley. It's the size of a shoebox. And the poor chap here, Nick, he has to bring out at least 3 meals a day, and we expect biscuits and treats and cake and all sorts of wonderful things because we work really hard and we're hungry. We're hungry all the time. And he did a great job. But yeah, this is our galley, and what you see is what you get. So we literally have 1 bar fridge and a stove. Then to try to organize all the food for a longer journey, you get mess like this. You get milk crates, containers, boxes, all sorts of variations. You see the ship down below right now. It's a complete mess in the back because they're trying to keep us alive and fed and happy as best as they can. And they do a wonderful job at it. And then you get this. This is our main hold. This is a little bit earlier picture. It's not us today. We are a little bit tidier today, although yesterday I shoved a lot of things out of the main cabin straight down below because we had to do a parade of sail and we had visitors on board, and I was like, up, down you go. So yes, we are still of a flux. But, we mainly sleep in hammocks, which is occasionally comfortable. Occasionally not, especially when you have 2 like this together really closely. You can find somebody's leg hanging in your hammock and trying to stretch out. Did you go like, no, you stay in your hammock and we'll just swing with the waves together. Good fun, good fun. We do that a lot. So yes, this is our sleeping quarters. So no privacy. It's just one big open space and we have to share it. And how it works on board our ship is you pick a spot, you call it yours, and good luck to you. If you've got a good spot, occasionally you might be dry. Because even though we work hard on trying to keep her as watertight as she can, she does leak. It's much better now. When I joined the ship back in 2009, she was a basket. Literally a basket, because there was not a single dry spot anywhere. But we got the deck replaced in 2016, this time with the right grain of timbers and traditional caulking instead of the modern sticker flex that they chose in the first game. So we can do repairs now, which is fantastic. All right, and then you get the crew, the people that make the machine work. Without crew, we won't go anywhere. And you have a crew of all walks of life and all different tasks. So how it works for us, we have a captain, Uber overlord. He's in charge, got to do what he says. Then you have the next level is your mates. Then the next level is your leading hands. Then the next level is your deck hands. Most times we have a captain on board that is not an Uberlord. He's just part of the crew and doesn't mind getting his hands dirty, jump on the whipstaff, to give you a spill when you want to eat, or help out setting sails and pull on lines. Because we're only a little ship, so any person that wants to lend a hand, pull on a rope, we as crew, we highly appreciate it. And yes, sometimes it's like this. Teeth in a bone, nice breeze up astern, hard work, but oh so much fun. Sometimes it's like this. Lots and lots of rain, and luckily we've got good weather gear. Occasionally you get a sailor that comes for the first time and he thinks that it's okay to bring not wet weather gear. Big mistake, big mistake. So yeah, you got your glory, you got your less fun bits. And then you get your bonus points. What I call bonus points is when you go for anchor. And usually we anchor on beautiful spots that you can go for a swim. Yes, with the crocodile and shark watchers here in Australia, because you guys keep saying it's safe to go into water, but I don't believe you. occasionally you get this, when you get the crystal blue waters with the dolphins saying hello. And I must say, coming down the Tasmanian coast last week, we've had so many pots of dolphins coming to say hello to us, and it was so much appreciated, because coming down from Sydney, we had a rough track. And then have the crystal waters and have the pods of dolphins with their little ones coming, doing loop-de-loops and flips. It's the little treats of making sailing all worthwhile. Like, for instance, when we came into Eden, we ducked into Eden from Sydney to here, because sadly for this voyage from Sydney to Hobart, we had a lot of southerlies, which will be great for the way back, but it was not so much fun for coming down here. So we had to do a lot of motoring. And we were sailing into Eden because the captain decided to be safe, and I really appreciate it from him. He was not one of those masters that said, we are a sailing ship and we need to keep on going. He was like, no, there's a big southerly going. I'm going to keep my crew safe. I'm going to keep the ship safe. We went to Eden, and the night before we went into Eden, there was this fluorescent algae. If you haven't heard about it, it's magical. It's this little algae that lights up when you disturb it. And we had these dolphins playing in it. And it was just like water shoots of these traces of dolphins coming through the water. And it was just absolutely fantastic, because the day before, 13 of our 17 crew members were sick as a dog, spewing everywhere, because we were going through some rough waters, under engine, having the miserable time of our life, and then have that as a treat. We actually woke the other watch up to deck to have a fun memory of sailing with Duyfken, because sadly, under engine sea is not much fun. And this is part of our crew. So I joined the ship in 2009. I've been with her for the last 14 years. And I've trained up, sailed with, been part of more than 1,000 volunteers' lives. And without these people, without their hard work, we would not be sailing. Because for a long time, the ship was a non-profit volunteer organization. I've only been with the National Maritime Museum now for 2 years. And still, without volunteers, we will not be able to go anywhere. So I highly appreciate everybody's task. I was a volunteer on her for 12 years, and I've only been paid now with the museum for the last 2. And even if they didn't pay me, I would still be with her if I could. So when you're sailing, sometimes things break. So this is our main course. That got a tear in it in 2012, and we're doing repairs along the way so that we can set it again. This was in 2011 when we came into the Sydney Harbour. This is in WA, and that's in WA as well. But the theme here is our main course. Our main course is the biggest sail we got, and it weighs about 500 kilos all up with the yard and all. And if you thought that we got hidden buttons that we can press and all the sun sails are set, I have to disappoint you. No, everything is done by hand. From setting the anchor to setting the sails, everything is done by hand. Raising the yards, it's pulling on lines. The only hidden buttons we got is for the engines, pretty much. And a 12-volt pitch pump, because the traditional ones are a pain. So this photo here is the ship sailing in the North Sea. So this Duyfken has sailed all the way around the world, not just in Australian waters. This is the biggest trip she did. She sailed from Fremantle to Sydney, from Sydney to Indonesia, from Indonesia down to South Africa, then up the coast to the Netherlands for the anniversary of 400 years of the VOC company. So she spent 6 months in the Netherlands and then was shipped back. But they sailed traditionally all the way from Australia to the Netherlands. That whole journey took about 9 to 11 months. Longest time period between 2 ports was 3 months. Lots of beans and lentils and rice. And yes, and if you guys were at the Sail Off Parade yesterday, you might have heard a few booms. It was us. Sorry. We at a certain point we started doing the countdowns because we actually scared the passengers on our own ship. So yeah, at a certain point we just started doing the countdowns, but we had so much fun. So we have a working Falcon on board. We don't carry cannons. Cannons are a size bigger. And the plan is that, I'll give you a heads up now, every day at 1 o'clock we're going to try to fire it. We just got to talk to the ship that's behind us, making sure that we don't scare the living daylights out of them. And we know the master of it, so I think it's going to be okay, but I did send my gunner to go over and have a little chat with him. So yeah, that's all the photos I managed to squeeze into my presentation. I got billions more, as you can imagine. If you want to come and see us, we're right over there. Big yellow flag on the top, hardly to miss. It's called Duyfken. Myself and a lot of volunteers are on board, so if you've got any questions or you want to come and have a chat, feel free to come. We're there to have a chat with you. Take as long as you like. If you miss out here and you come to Sydney, come and see us. We're there to share our stories, share the knowledge of the ship, share our passion. And I know that all the sails here are sold out, but if you ever find yourself in Sydney and you want to experience what it's like, or a little snippet of what it's like, sail Duyfken, come and see us. We sail twice a week. It's good fun. Because we set all the sails and we pack it away and you get to sleep in your own bed at the end. How fantastic is that? I won't make you sleep in a hammock or on bricks. All right, so we still got some time, so if anybody has questions, please wait till my beautiful assistant Pam comes with the microphone so that everybody can hear it. All right, sir.
Just about the sailing ability, what about going to windward? How
She
close
doesn't go,
can she just sail to windward?
About 65 degrees. So for people who don't know what that means, we can't sail with anything that comes towards us. Anything that comes from behind, we can have a party with. Anything that comes towards us, we just go backwards. That's it. And then when it comes from the side, yes, we're going ahead, but we mainly drift sideways. Because we don't have a keel.
Just a comment and a question. I came onto the Duyfken, I think the last festival or the one before that, and I was really amazed at how much fun you all seem to be having, you know. So you're a good example of what the rest of the crew are like in my experience. But my question is, if you go to the Rijksmuseum, you can see these amazing models of ships that were built as, I think, sales devices, you know, they were part of the marketing of, you know, selling a ship to the Dutch East India Company or something. Was there anything like that at the Duyfken? Were there any models that had been built for, you know, development of the ship itself, or to show prospective ship owners, you know, what was available?
During the build, you mean?
Yeah, was there anything built at the time when the Duyfken was originally built? Were there any models produced?
Not necessarily. There's a lot of information that we nowadays get from models, because model makers, they've done a lot of legwork for a lot of historians that want to build ships after this. All these hands, I'm getting nervous now. One at a time. All right, give the microphone to Ellie. That's Ellie, by the way. She's been with the ship for a very long time, and she's done a lot of study into boat building and stuff. So I don't mind Ellie answering the question at all. Ellie, go for it.
Now, there is another example, the Half Moon. The first Half Moon was built in New York, the replica. And that was the ship of James Hudson. He was an English captain in duty of the VOC. And he tried to find the passage above North America. And in early 1900, they tried to build a replica of the Half Moon without drawings, because they were not. But they used indeed the same drawings as in the Rijksmuseum. There is a whole section of half models in the Rijksmuseum and models, but no yacht. And the Half Moon was also an example. And we still have a replica of the Half Moon. The second one is built also in New York in the 80s, so, because the other one was burned. And that's now in the Netherlands since about 8 years.
Thank you, Ellie.
I'll just add something to that if I can. I'm from the Maritime Museum in Fremantle and was involved in building the ship. Well, the thing to remember about the Duyfken is that she was a very disposable ship. She was just a workboat. So she wasn't a big flash retour ship like the Batavia. So, you know, they made them by the million and she was disposable, so that's why she was sent off on the trip that eventually found Australia. But the thing about designing the Duyfken was that it was done very much through iconography by examining the images in the background of all these grand paintings, like the one that Mirjam showed us at the beginning. And by establishing that there was common proportions in these ships, in the form of the hull, the proportions of the hull and the proportion of the rigging, Adrian and Nick, who essentially designed the ship, were able to put together the kind of rules that the shipwrights worked at, and then compare that with what we know of the performance of the ship. And indeed, the performance of the Duyfken very closely matches what we know of the performance of the original Duyfken. So it was actually a really interesting bit of scientific backward reasoning to develop the ship.
Yeah, thank you. Does that answer your question, sir? Okay, cool. Thank you for your support. I highly appreciate it. All right, this gentleman here had a question. Just wait for the microphone, please.
So tell us about how you get halfway around the world when you really can't sail better than, I guess, really you're reaching up and down, going sideways. So you've got to wait for the weather to actually change. So they would have had to wait for total weather systems to just come through, and but you can't sort of find a little cove to anchor. So how did the captains do that in those days? To sail halfway or to sail around the world, for goodness sake?
Yeah, so you have different ways. There is other books that we found lots of information about. There's something that's called heave to. You might have heard of that. It's the way you brace your yards, not in a sailing configuration, but you actually brace them around that they counter each other, and then you put the ship sideways to the waves. We have done that. For instance, in 2012, we were meant to go into Cairns, but we were too early. We had to slow the ship down. There was no way to anchor, and it was only for a couple of hours. It was not like waiting out a complete storm front. But we had to slow the ship down, so we braced the yards around so it was counter each other, and then lashed the helm down, because when you turn the helm down, it acts as a brake. And we just put the ship sideways on the waves, and we just drifted with the water, but we pretty much stayed stationary. And then when the tide was at the right height for us to go into Cairns, because Cairns has very low tides, and you have to wait for the right tides to actually make it inside, we could drop our sails and we sailed in. So other way to stay in one spot is, for instance, a sea anchor. You can use your spritsail and make it into a sea anchor. A sea anchor is a big piece of cloth that you just tie to a yard or a stick, and you throw that in the water, and that keeps you stationary with whatever tide you're in. So you might still move one place to another place, but you stay in one spot. So you have options to reduce your windage, reduce your drift in that way. And other than that, yes, you gotta ride it out. And occasionally that means 9 days of no wind. That's also riding it out. We've had that we came down from Darwin to Port Hedland, and the first 5 days we were humming along. We were doing 8, 9, 11 knots. That we go like, we got 3 weeks for this journey. We're gonna be there in 4 days. On day 5, the wind dropped. And then we had 9 days of absolutely nothing. The ocean was smoother than this wall here. We had seabirds overtaking us and creating waves on the ocean. It was incredible. It was incredible. You get those sort of circumstances, and we were too far out that we could say we motored to the next port. We had enough biscuits and pasta and beans on board for the whole trip. So for 9 days, what we did was doing figures of 8 with the tide. And we rubbed holes in the map because they love putting their little markings down. And we're going 9 days over the exact same spot. So yes, we have holes in the map of where we went for 9 days on the same spots in figures of 8. So that's sailing. That it's not always about the destination. That destination is nice to have. Like when we left Sydney to Hobart, and we had southerlies, and we had to motor, and we got to Eden. Somebody asked me, "Oh, are you going to go to Hobart?" I said, "Well, we're going to give it a try. If it doesn't work out, we'll go back to Sydney. Or we'll end up in Melbourne, or New Zealand, or wherever. But yeah, we'll try to make it there, but there's no guarantees that we're going to make it. Because we're a 16th century vessel. We're limited in what we can do. We have limited amount of fuel on board. We're not a patrol boat that they can just launch and be there in Hobart in 3 days. We'll never make it in 3 days unless the wind is up and we got a good breeze. And then still, we can't go fast enough. We're not like the super yachts that do it in 3 days. We left on the 27th and we arrived Monday. So you do the math, because I have no idea what day it is today. I'm still in sailing brain. Because when you're sailing, you do your watch and you go to bed and then you get woken up and you go to bed and you get woken up and you go to bed and you get woken up, and it's only been 1 day, but it feels like 3. So for me personally, it was at least a month. But here on shore, you probably say we did it in 9 days. So yeah, you do the math. Because for me, it was way longer than it was for people on shore. Yes, sir, please.
What happened to the original ship?
Ah, good question. Very good question. So the original Duyfken was built in 1595, and it lasted to 1608. So she was there for 13 years. To put it in perspective, Duyfken just turned 24. So we've outlived the original one. So we're doing really well. Big bonus, they stopped shooting at us. We just shoot at other people nowadays. So the original ship sailed a couple of times across the world, sailed for many years in Indonesia, and that's sadly her downfall. Because in tropical waters, you might have heard it, is a little worm called teredo worm, and they love timber, and especially oak, because in tropical waters, and it's not a local timber, there is no oils in it that they don't like to munch on. So Duyfken being there was just this big buffet, eat all you want, type ship. So sadly, she was riddled with teredo worm. So back then, to do maintenance on the ship, the only way to do it was to actually beach the ship. So they went in, sailed her onto a beach, did the survey of the hull, and found that a lot of the hull planks were weakened by teredo worm, and there was not enough timber to say it's worth fixing her. So she was actually dismantled. The good timber is used for other vessels, and the rest was burned so that others couldn't use it. So that's how she ended up. So there's no dive wreck. You can't go swimming. She didn't hit disaster and sank. No, she was actually dismantled. There's some more questions here?
Yeah, I've got a bit of a technical question. Why is the first mast, why is that like bended forward compared to the second one?
Very good question. So when you have a square rigger and you have your sails, if they are exactly the same and you go on a tack, so a tack is that you brace your sails around. If they're exactly the same, you get a lot of wind shadow, because your first one will shadow the other one. By raking one aft and raking the other one forwards, just lets wind shadow, so you go faster.
Yeah, I'm just wondering what you would have used as ballast for the replica?
So on the replica, it's actually pig iron from the submarine Onslow from Fremantle. So we actually are currently carrying the ballast of a submarine. So under our floor, when you go on board, sadly you can't go down below because it's not open to the public, but in the main hold we have a floor, and at the moment it's one layer of bricks, because in the olden days they would have used bricks or other heavy items from the Netherlands towards Indonesia, because bricks are really useful because you can build things with it. And they were at the beginning of the VOC company, so they were still building houses and infrastructure and roads. So bricks were very useful. So they would use bricks as ballast back then, but we have iron on board. So that keeps our hold open, because if we had to do it 16th century style, we have to fill the whole ship up with all sorts of random items, and we can't sleep down there. And we like sleeping.
And how would that iron be fixed so it didn't, if you let
So
over
they're
it?
all shaped as a triangle. So they stack together, and then there is a big bar-shaped bracket, strap, right word, screwed in to keep it in place, so that when the ship rolls, not the whole ballast goes to one side and we tip over and sink.
Your question to this fellow might have answered it, but just a question about the forward mast, the one that looks to us like a bowsprit.
Oh, the bowsprit?
Yeah.
Yep.
Now, it's a large spar, but yet there's actually only a relatively small sail. I'm just wondering, is there other uses for it? Seems like a lot of trouble for a relatively small square sail.
Oh,
Is
the
it
sail
also
is
used
the
for other
bonus
things?
one.
Sorry?
The sail is the bonus one. That yard is the Achilles heel of the ship, because that yard keeps the forestay in place, the main topstay in place. The sail that hangs under it is a bonus. It's just to counter out the high stern in the back for steerage. But the main purpose of the bowsprit is to keep your foremast in place when the sails are backed. So your shrouds, the big lines that go this, they keep it upright for all the forces for the sail pulling it forwards. But you need something to keep the mast from falling aft, and that's your stays, and that's the purpose of the bowsprit. If we lose the bowsprit, we can't sail with any sails on board. And that goes for any ship with the bowsprit. The bowsprit is your most important part of the vessel, mast-wise.
Is your navigation all sat-nav now, or do you still use clocks and sextants from time to time?
We use both. So we mainly have the one box AIS system with a beautiful map on it. It's very handy, because then you just can walk over, glance at it, oh, that's where we are. But we do have sextants, and we all the mates and captains that we have on board, they do make an effort to use that as well. And then occasionally I throw them a curveball, and I say, use the astrolabe, because that's what they would have used back in the 16th century. And for the people that don't know what an astrolabe is, it's a round disc with the degrees on it, and it has a little movable stick with two little plates on it with a little hole, and you line it up with the sun. So don't look through it, damage your eyes. You make it shine onto a surface, and then you can read degrees. And you try to do it at midday, because then the sun is at the highest point. And when you're working with hourglasses, that's quite tricky. So you start looking at sun and then gauge a little bit to well, it's the higher points, and you just do a lot till you write down when it was actually at the highest point. Yes, it's good fun. All right, anybody, last question? If anybody still has a question, feel free to ask it now.
This is fantastic. We're all enjoying this so much.
Sorry.
Can you tell us a little bit about the motor, fuel capacity and so forth, and performance of the motor on the boat?
Yeah, we got 2 engines, they're yellow. So, we got fitted out a couple of years ago with 2 brand spanking new engines. They're John Deere. If you want to know the numbers on them and the KPIs and the running hours and all that sort of thing, I enjoy inviting you to come on board and have a chat to our bosun, because anything electrical, I palm off to him. I do know that these new engines, they performed really well. Old engines, we could get 2 days of motoring out of it, and we did a lot of motoring coming here, and we had fuel left over. So we're very impressed with these ones, because this is the longer journey that they did, that they actually had the motor for quite a distance. I know that I like the revs to sitting on 1400, because then I don't get thrown out of my bunk. Anything higher, I go flying. So yes, that's what I can tell you about our wonderful engines. And I know that we got 2,400 litres of fuel on board.
Yellow is my favourite colour.
Excellent, excellent. I know that I have to hand over at 11:30 to Chris, so I'm doing really well here. So I'm just going to hand back to Chris so that he can keep this party going. Like I said, if you want to come and ask more questions or have a chat to us, we're on board. Feel free to come and say hello. We'll do our best to answer every questions you got. And thank you very much for listening to me. I hope you had a good time.